He humiliated me in front of the entire staff on my very first day, and he had no idea who I really was. I stayed quiet, letting him enjoy his little moment of power, pretending not to care. But 2 days later, everything changed when the CEO walked in and asked for me by name. The manager's face went pale and the room fell silent. And that's when this story truly begins. My name is Oliver Hartwell, and I'm 50 years old. For the past 6 months, I'd been living a double life. By day, I was Oliver Morrison, a regular warehouse worker at Hartwell Industries in Portland, Oregon. But in reality, I'm the son of William Hartwell, the 72-year-old founder and CEO who built this company from nothing 47 years ago. Why was I pretending to be someone else? Because my father called me one night, his voice heavy with worry, and said something that changed everything. "Oliver, I think I'm losing control of my own company. New managers are coming in, treating people terribly, and nobody tells me the truth anymore. They see the CEO coming and put on a show. I need someone on the inside who can see what's really happening." So we made a plan. I would work under my mother's maiden name, Morrison, with my real resume showing 28 years of logistics experience. Only 2 people would know the truth: my father and his assistant Margaret Chen, who'd been with him for 34 years. I'd work for 1 month, document everything, and report back. It seemed simple enough. What I didn't expect was Derek Pemberton, the new 38-year-old logistics manager who'd been hired 3 weeks before I started. And I definitely didn't expect him to target me from the very first minute of my very first day. That Monday morning in October, I walked into the warehouse at 7 a.m. wearing regular work clothes, jeans, a plain shirt, steel-toed boots from Walmart. I introduced myself to the security guard, a friendly guy named Carlos, and made my way to the main floor where about 40 workers were starting their shifts. The warehouse was massive, filled with furniture inventory stacked on industrial shelves and forklifts moving smoothly between the aisles. I felt proud seeing what my father had built, even if nobody there knew who I really was. That feeling lasted exactly 3 minutes, until Derek Pemberton walked up to me. He didn't introduce himself, didn't shake my hand, just looked me up and down like I was a piece of defective merchandise. "You Morrison?" he asked, not bothering with basic courtesy. "Yes, sir. Oliver Morrison. Today's my first day as warehouse supervisor. Looking forward to working with you," I said, extending my hand. He ignored it completely. "50 years old, huh? That's what your file says." The way he said it made it sound like an accusation, like being 50 was somehow offensive to him personally. Before I could respond, he raised his voice so the whole warehouse could hear. "All right, everyone, listen up. This is Oliver Morrison, our new supervisor. I want you all to understand something important right now." Derek walked in a circle around me like a predator sizing up prey, making sure every single worker was watching. I don't care how many years of experience someone claims to have on their resume. What matters here is performance, results, and keeping up with the pace of modern business. Age doesn't impress me, and neither do old-school methods from the 20th century. Everyone here earns their place every single day. No exceptions. He stopped directly in front of me, his arms crossed. "Got it, Morrison? Or should I speak slower so you can keep up?" Several younger workers snickered. An older woman with graying hair looked down at her feet, embarrassed on my behalf, and I just stood there, swallowing my anger, and said calmly, "I understand. Where would you like me to start?" Derek smiled, the kind of smile a bully wears when they know they've landed a hit. "Inventory count. Section D. Every single item needs to be verified against the computer system. Should take you all day if you actually do it right. Or maybe 2 days, at your age." He handed me a scanner and walked away, already moving on to his next victim. I spent that first day counting furniture pieces, scanning barcodes, and watching how Derek operated, and what I saw made my blood boil. He criticized a woman named Rita Morales, who I later learned had been there 17 years, for taking too long on an order she was doing perfectly. He threatened to write up a young forklift driver named Marcus for sloppy driving, even though the kid's safety record was spotless. Every interaction was designed to intimidate, to remind people that Derek was in charge and their years of loyalty meant nothing to him. During lunch in the break room, I sat with some of the longtime employees and just listened. Rita unwrapped her sandwich and said quietly, 2 weeks. That's how long Derek's been here, and he's already made this place feel completely different. Mr. Hartwell built this company on treating people right, but Derek treats us like we're disposable. An older man named Frank, who was about 60 with calloused hands and tired eyes, nodded in agreement. I've been here 22 years. Never thought about leaving until now. But I've got 3 years until retirement, and I don't know if I can last 3 more weeks with that guy. I asked careful questions, learning that Derek had already fired 2 people, both over 50, and was constantly making comments about needing younger blood and fresh energy. By the end of day 1, I'd documented 17 separate incidents of age discrimination, hostile work environment, and just plain cruelty. When I got home that night, I called my father. "Dad, it's worse than you thought. This isn't about demanding standards. It's about systematic bullying. Derek Pemberton is destroying morale and driving out your best people." There was a long silence before my father responded, his voice tight with controlled anger. "How bad, Oliver?" I told him everything. When I finished, he said, "I want to fire him tomorrow. Right now, actually." But I convinced him to wait. "Dad, if you act too fast, it looks like you're overreacting to one report. Give me 3 days. Let Derek show you who he really is, document everything, and then we'll expose him properly in front of everyone." Day 2 started with Derek, assigning me to the loading dock, the hardest physical job in the warehouse. "Let's see if that 50-year-old back of yours can handle real work, Morrison," he announced to the whole morning crew. I spent 8 hours loading furniture onto trucks alongside 2 younger guys, Marcus and a kid named Tommy who was 19 and fresh out of high school. My back screamed, my hands blistered, but I kept pace and didn't complain. Every time I paused to catch my breath, Derek appeared like a vulture. "Taking a break already? Maybe this job is too much for you. Maybe you should think about retirement." The younger workers started helping me when Derek wasn't looking, deliberately slowing their pace so I could keep up. That's when I realized something important. The workers weren't the problem. Derek was, and they were all quietly waiting for someone to do something about it. But then, something unexpected happened during the afternoon break. I was sitting outside on a bench, eating my sandwich, when I overheard Derek on his phone behind the building. "Yeah, the old guy Morrison. Something's off about him. His resume shows him working at competitor companies, but when I called to verify, they had no record of an Oliver Morrison in their system." My heart stopped. Derek was checking my references. The fake employment history my father's lawyer had created was falling apart. "I'm going to dig deeper," Derek continued. "If this guy lied on his application, I can fire him for cause and make an example out of him, maybe even sue him for fraud." I sat frozen, my sandwich forgotten. The plan was unraveling, and I had less than 24 hours before Derek figured out the truth. That night, I called my father in a panic. "Dad, Derek's investigating my background. He's going to discover that Oliver Morrison doesn't exist at those companies, and then he's going to start digging into who I really am. We need to move up the timeline." My father was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. "Good. Let him dig. Margaret's going to make sure he finds exactly what we want him to find." I didn't understand until my father explained. "Son, Margaret's been managing my calendar and communications for 34 years. She's brilliant at information management. By tomorrow morning, Derek's going to get an anonymous email with documents suggesting that Oliver Morrison might be using a false identity. But the documents won't point to you being my son. They'll suggest you might be a corporate spy from our biggest competitor, here to steal trade secrets." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, that's going to make things so much worse for me tomorrow. Derek's going to do exactly what bullies always do when they think they have power," my father interrupted. "He's going to confront you publicly, humiliate you in front of everyone, and try to force you to confess. And when he does that, when he crosses that final line, I'm going to walk through those warehouse doors and show him who you really are. Sometimes, Oliver, you have to let people hang themselves with their own rope." Derek thinks he's about to expose a fraud. Instead, he's about to reveal himself as exactly the kind of manager who should never have power over anyone. Day 3 started with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Derek was waiting for me when I clocked in at 7 a.m., and his expression was pure predatory satisfaction. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me with a smirk, like a cat that had finally cornered a mouse. The morning meeting happened at 7:30, with all 40 warehouse workers gathered in the main area. Derek stood on a platform so everyone could see him, holding a folder that I knew contained whatever evidence Margaret had planted. "Before we start work today," Derek announced, "we need to address a serious issue. a matter of honesty and integrity. He opened the folder dramatically and pulled out papers, waving them for everyone to see. Oliver Morrison here applied for his position, claiming to have 28 years of experience at various logistics companies. But when I did my due diligence, something HR apparently failed to do, I discovered something very interesting. None of those companies have any record of an Oliver Morrison ever working there. Not one. So I started digging deeper, and I found evidence suggesting that Mr. Morrison might not be who he claims to be at all. The warehouse went completely silent. Rita's hand flew to her mouth. Frank's expression went from confusion to anger. Marcus looked ready to defend me, and I just stood there, letting Derek have his moment, knowing what was coming. In fact, Derek continued, pacing back and forth like a prosecutor making his case, the evidence suggests that Oliver Morrison might actually be a corporate spy, planted here by our competitors to steal proprietary information about our operations, our clients, and our business strategies. Identity fraud, corporate espionage, these are serious crimes. He turned to face me directly, his voice dripping with false concern. So, Morrison, or whatever your real name is, I'm giving you one chance to come clean. Tell everyone here who you really are and why you're really here, or I'm calling the police right now and having you arrested for fraud. The moment hung in the air, electric with tension. Every eye in the warehouse was on me, waiting to see what I would say, how I would defend myself against these accusations. I took a slow breath, looked Derek straight in the eye, and said calmly, "You're absolutely right, Derek. Oliver Morrison isn't my real name. I have been lying about my identity since the day I arrived." The gasps from the workers were immediate. Derek's smile grew wider, thinking he'd won. "And I think," I continued, "that before I explain who I really am, we should wait for one more person to arrive. He should be here any minute now." As if on cue, the main warehouse door opened, and my father walked in. William Hartwell, 72 years old, dressed in his usual navy suit, white hair perfectly combed, carrying himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. Every worker immediately straightened up, not out of fear, but out of respect. Carlos, the security guard, had clearly been instructed to let him in without announcement. My father's assistant, Margaret Chen, followed behind him, carrying a tablet and looking all business. Derek's confident smile faltered for just a second as he tried to figure out why the CEO was making an unannounced visit. "Mr. Hartwell? Sir? What a surprise. I was just handling a serious security issue. This man here has been working under a false identity, and I was about to— I know exactly who he is, Mr. Pemberton," my father said, his voice carrying clearly across the warehouse. "And I know exactly why he's here, because I'm the one who sent him." Derek's face went from confusion to concern to slowly dawning horror as my father walked across the warehouse floor to stand beside me. "Everyone," my father addressed the assembled workers, "I'd like to formally introduce you to my son. His real name is Oliver Hartwell. He's 50 years old. He has 28 years of legitimate experience in logistics and operations, and for the past 3 days, he's been working here under his mother's maiden name because I asked him to. I needed someone I could trust to see what was really happening in this warehouse, to experience firsthand how new management was treating our people." The explosion of shocked gasps and exclamations was immediate. Rita's eyes went wide with disbelief. Frank actually laughed out loud, a bark of surprised vindication. Marcus whispered, "No way," to Tommy beside him. And Derek's face went through every shade of pale as he realized the catastrophic magnitude of his mistake. That's not— You can't," he stammered, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? If I'd known who he was, I never would have—" "That's exactly the problem, Mr. Pemberton," my father interrupted, his voice cold in a way I rarely heard. "You wouldn't have treated my son that way if you'd known who he was. But you had no problem treating Oliver Morrison, a 50-year-old man with decades of experience, with complete contempt." My father pulled out his own folder, much thicker than Derek's, and held it up. Over the past 3 days, my son documented everything, every insult about his age, every impossible task designed to make him fail, every public humiliation, every threat. But more importantly, he documented how you've treated every single person in this warehouse. Rita Morales, 17 years with this company, criticized for doing her job correctly. Frank Patterson, 22 years of loyal service, made to feel worthless because of his age. Marcus Williams, perfect safety record, threatened with write-ups for imaginary infractions. 2 employees fired in 2 weeks for being over 50. And a toxic environment where good people are afraid to speak up because you've made it clear that questioning you means losing your job. Derek tried to salvage the situation, his words tumbling out desperately. "Mr. Hartwell, please, I was just trying to improve efficiency, set higher standards. My methods might have been a bit rough, but I was getting results. Productivity is up 8% since Productivity means nothing if we lose our soul in the process." My father cut him off. "Derek Pemberton, you are terminated effective immediately for creating a hostile work environment, engaging in age discrimination, and violating every principle this company was built on. Margaret will escort you to collect your personal items. You have 15 minutes to leave this property." The silence that followed was absolute. Derek looked around desperately, searching for sympathy or support from the workers he'd tormented, and found none, only cold stares and crossed arms. "You'll hear from my lawyers," he finally said, his voice shaking. "This is wrongful termination. I have a contract." Margaret stepped forward. "All business. Mr. Pemberton, we have 3 days of documented evidence, witness testimony from dozens of employees, and recordings of your statements about age being a factor in employment decisions. Our legal team is very confident in our position. I strongly suggest you accept the severance offer we're prepared to make and sign the non-disclosure agreement. Otherwise, all of this becomes public record in a lawsuit, and your career in management will be over before it begins." Derek grabbed his jacket, his phone, his coffee mug from the office, and walked past all of us without another word. We watched his car pull out of the parking lot, and then, spontaneously, the warehouse erupted in applause. Rita was crying happy tears. Frank shook my hand so hard I thought he'd break it. Marcus and Tommy high-fived each other, and my father stood there watching it all with quiet satisfaction, then raised his hands for silence. "I owe all of you an apology. I let Derek Pemberton come into this company without doing enough research into who he really was. I allowed him to create an environment that goes against everything we stand for. That's on me, and I'm sorry." He paused and then continued. "But I want you to know something important. Hartwell Industries was built on the principle that experience matters, that treating people with respect matters, and that profit should never come at the cost of human dignity. Those aren't old-fashioned values. They're the only values that matter. And I'm formally announcing today that Oliver Hartwell will be taking over as your new logistics manager. He's earned this position through his work these past 3 days and his 28 years of experience. Please give him the same dedication and respect you've given this company." The applause was even louder this time, genuine and enthusiastic. Over the next few weeks, I worked to rebuild what Derek had broken. I reinstated the afternoon breaks, reversed his benefit cuts, and personally called the 2 employees he'd fired, offering them their jobs back with full back pay and a formal apology. Rita became one of my most trusted advisors, sharing insights from her 17 years that helped me improve processes. Frank started a mentorship program, training younger workers on techniques he'd perfected over 2 decades. Marcus got promoted to lead forklift operator, and slowly, steadily, morale came back. The warehouse transformed into the kind of workplace it should always have been, where people were valued, where experience was respected, and where hard work was rewarded with dignity. 6 months later, my father announced his retirement plan. He'd transitioned to chairman of the board while I gradually took over as CEO of Hartwell Industries. When employees heard that I would be leading the company, the response was overwhelming support. I'd earned their trust not by being the founder's son, but by working beside them, understanding their challenges, and proving that respect and competence weren't outdated concepts. They were timeless truths. As for Derek Pemberton, I heard he tried to find another management position but kept running into problems when companies called for references. He eventually had to take a significant step down in his career. I didn't take pleasure in that, but I also didn't feel guilty. He'd been given power and chose to abuse it. The consequences were his alone to bear. Looking back on those 3 days, the humiliation, the physical exhaustion, the deliberate cruelty, I realize it was one of the most valuable experiences of my career. It taught me what powerlessness feels like, what it's like to rely on coworkers for solidarity, and that a company's culture isn't determined by mission statements on walls. It's determined by how people with power treat people without it, in small moments when nobody important is watching. Derek thought he was humiliating some random 50-year-old worker who couldn't fight back. Instead, he revealed exactly who he was to the one person who had the power to stop him. And in the end, that made all the difference. If this story of standing up against workplace bullies and age discrimination resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about people who refused to be victims and found justice. And you absolutely need to watch our previous video about the boss who fired a man for being too old, not knowing that man was actually the majority shareholder who owned 64% of the company. The moment of revelation when the boss realized his mistake is absolutely priceless. Click the video on your screen right now. Thanks for watching, and remember, never judge people by their age or appearance. You have no idea who they really are or what power they hold.